This is beyond just the law court. This is about winning the trust of the people whose money, because INEC is funded by taxpayers' money, right?
True.
Whose monies are made available for INEC to do their job. They need to win back that trust. But one of the ways to come up clean and say, look, here's what happened, this happened, we dropped the ball here, or this particular aspect of our system failed, but these are the things we have put in place, and carry along civil society, for example, so that they can independently also give that guarantee and say, look, INEC has carried us along every step of the way. This was where some of those failures came from, and they have been rectified. That's one. Two, there's the other part that deals with our stakeholders. Whenever we begin to have elections that divide us along the lines of religion and ethnicity, it never bodes well for the people. Because at the end of the day, the people will suffer. The elections, even if it's 10% voter turnout, winners will be announced. As far as certain conditions are met. For example, 25% in one third. You get, is it 25% in 21 states, two-thirds of the states, and all of that. Similar provision will apply within the state context. So as far as some of those provisions are made, a simple majority once those conditions are made. So, but you suffer, relationships suffer, people actually could be hurt when we have this kind of issues come up. So it is the job of both us, religious leaders, traditional rulers, other key stakeholders and influencers to say to the people, look guys, we might come from different ethnic groups, we might have different religious affiliation. Regardless, to select our leaders, these are what you need to look out for. Let us concentrate on the issues. If there are issues of fairness that we need to address, let us address them logically. Let us address them objectively. Let us not just go and say, oh, it's because he's from here, that's why I have to do this. Let's address issues in a proper way. So I think that our stakeholders, leaders, both religious, civil, traditional, and other kinds of influencers, they have a role to play to ensure that the polity is not heated up, and that would help to reduce the tension and reduce the potentials for violence. Then, of course, the issue of logistics it's an issue that INEC would need to work on. How do you get these materials to the places where they need to be at the time when they need to get there? And these are issues that INEC need to begin to, and I want to believe they've started, but they need to, voter education must be done much more than before. They must work with both the media, they must work with the civil society organization to reach out to the people and say, look at what we are doing, and do it in a transparent manner. These are the failures that happen with logistics. These are why materials didn't get to these places at such times. And then say, this is what we have done and what we are doing to ensure that that doesn't repeat itself. So we need to handle the issue of logistics. We need to handle the issue of the people who man technology. We don't, as the people, we shouldn't just rely only on technology. Technology is worked by people. So if you have the wrong people there, the technology will be used wrongly. And then we need to handle the issue of how utterances, especially at this time, so that we can douse the tension and have ourselves an election and elect a leader. Let us focus on the issues and try and reduce the issue of the differences that we have in maybe religious affiliations and ethnic affiliations. So these are some of the things I think that INEC can do. Political parties also have a role to play, because political parties, their utterances are also stirring up people. Sometimes a political leader or a candidate or an aspirant might not necessarily might feel that he doesn't mean any harm. But what you say, you don't control how people take it. So you have to think twice before you make certain utterances. When you make an utterance, and people are going to run with it, and they're not going to check back with you and say, boss, this thing you said, do you want me to run it this way? They're just going, and sometimes people want to impress their political principle. And sometimes they do it at the detriment of the people. So the political parties also, and the aspirants, they need to also sit down and look at this issue. Now, we usually come up with the issue of peace pact to do it in the national. They signed peace pact, but somehow utterances were still made that led to issues, fights, violence, and chaos down in the streets because people did not watch their utterances. So political parties, political aspirants, candidates, they also need to, now we have candidates, they're no longer, since we've done with the primaries, so we have candidates. The candidates also need to watch their utterances so they don't cause make inflammatory comments that can spark up violence in one way or the other. Then lastly, we have the security agencies. Although we have issues with the law. The law, for example, I believe that the position of the law as it is now is that the security agencies are not supposed to come with arms to the polling unit. That's the position of the law, for example. But regardless, there should be other modalities put in place. People move from one point to the other before they get to the polling units. the security agencies need to also come out and give assurance, beyond assurances, put steps in, put things in place, put things in motion to ensure that the issue of electoral violence are reduced to the minimum. And beyond just doing the right things, the people must perceive that you are actually doing the right thing and that they are non-partisan.
Okay, thank you. That was very insightful, well detailed, and okay. For those who are just turning on their radio set, you are listening to Issues and Grace 95.5 FM, and we are looking at Kogi State upcoming governorship election in November, and we have Mr. Ikejuku Mpama in the studio. He is the monitoring and evaluation officer for INGRA, doing a very fantastic job, helping us understand what to expect and the way forward for Kogi State election. Now, you mentioned something. You mentioned the candidates. Yeah. So now let's put a searchlight now on the candidates,
okay,
so to speak. We have lots of them, many of them candidates who have stepped up with their campaigns and manifestos and all of that. So, talking to the electorates, just speaking to one electorate, what do you look out for in a candidate who has come with sort of promises? And I want you to talk about that in respect to the outgoing governor, outgoing administration, and what do we look out for in the incoming? Who do we say, okay, this is what we're looking for someone who is credible? So what should let us know that you are the man or the woman or the person for the job? Talk about that in pari passu with the outgoing administration.
All right. So, although you have already preempted a bit of it, you mentioned, is it competence you mentioned? So someone came up with what is called the 3 C's. In 3 C's, it talked about character, talked about competence, what's the third C?
Credibility.
Credibility, good. So in credibility, of course, you have to look at the person's antecedents. Has a person occupied a public office before? How did the person perform there? That also gives you a little bit of an insight into the person's character. Competence, you also check how did the person, what are the person's competence? What particularly, apart from just competence on paper, for example, this is an organization, before you are going to hire somebody here, you would not just want, you want to look at the CV. So what did you study? Mm-hmm. What school? What did you come out with? Mm-hmm. And all of that. But beyond that, you also want to know, have you worked somewhere? And many organizations, they'll put you under probation for 3 months. They want to basically see how you've done. Yeah. Beyond that, you go through a written test, you go through an oral test. They want to see that what you indeed have as a capacity matches up with what you have presented on paper. Now, we might not have the exact same scenario here, but we do have similarities. One, whoever we want to have as a governor is basically like the people are hiring this person to say, okay, steer the affairs of the state in so and so number of years as stipulated by the Constitution. Now, we might not have the opportunity to come and sit there in a panel and watch them, but we have the opportunity to look at what they have done before. Mm-hmm. Have they occupied an office before? What did they do when they were in that office? When they were giving public trust? Because when you are occupying a public office, you are giving public trust. How did you handle it? And then you check out for those 3 C's in those ways. Again, I think it's also important to look at, the manifesto of the persons. Does it speak to the issues? And when the person, now sometimes people print out manifestos, but when they come out to speak in rallies, they leave out the manifesto and concentrate on maybe bringing down their opponent. One, we look at the manifesto for its own merit. Okay. What does the manifesto say? What does it state? Has this person, and again, the truth of the matter is that in Nigeria, we don't only vote a party. I'm talking in practice, not necessarily law. We don't only vote a person, we also vote the party. Because we understand that the party weighs a level of influence on the person. So it's also good to look at the party and say, the last time you had a manifesto, how well did they perform? Did they stick to it? So these are some of the things I think that we can look out when the electors are considering who to hire for the job of the governor of the state.